Sarah, we need to talk, my husband, Michael said. His voice sounded sad, but I knew he was pretending. I looked up from my laptop where I was planning our home renovation. His mother, Linda, stood beside him, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. My stomach tightened. I knew this act. Linda was very good at fake crying. The doctor says I have 6 months to live, Linda said, her voice shaking. I don't want to be alone. At the end, she fell into our armchair, the same one I had seen her measuring last week, complaining it didn't match her decor. My name is Sarah Parker, and at 34, I had finally bought my dream home. After my parents died in a car accident 2 years ago, I used my inheritance to buy a beautiful Victorian house. It needed work, but it was mine. Linda never liked that. Mom needs to move in with us, Michael said firmly. We can turn your art studio into her bedroom. My chest tightened. The art studio was special to me. It was my dream to paint there. The sunlight coming through the windows was perfect. I know this is unexpected, Linda sniffled, but family sticks together in hard times. She had never treated me as family in the 8 years I had been married to Michael. She always saw me as the woman who had trapped her son. Which doctor told you this? I asked carefully. Maybe we should get a second opinion. Linda hesitated, then said, Dr. Thompson. But I trust him. I nodded. Dr. Thompson, the same doctor who supposedly diagnosed her with a rare disease last year just before Michael and I were supposed to go to Italy. We cancelled our trip to take care of her, but 2 weeks later she was fine. I need to think about this, I said. Think about it? Michael shouted. My mother is dying. Where is your compassion? I looked at my husband. He had always chosen his mother over me. Something inside me changed. Yes, I need to think about it, I said firmly. This is my house, too. Actually, Linda said sweetly, since Michael is your husband, it's his house, too. And a son's duty to his mother. The house is in my name only, I cut in. I bought it with my inheritance. Linda's smile faded. But that's not the point. This is a big decision, and I won't rush into it. I walked outside to the garden, my favorite place. Sitting on a bench, I pulled out my phone and called Dr. Thompson's office. I'm sorry, the receptionist said. We have no patient records for Linda Morrison. I thanked her and hung up. My suspicions were right. I called my sister, Emma, a nurse. Can you check something for me? I asked. The next morning, I woke to the sound of hammering. I threw on my robe and rushed downstairs to find Michael and Linda in my art studio, measuring the walls. What are you doing? I demanded. Just getting a head start, Michael said without looking at me. Mom needs to know the dimensions for her furniture. Linda was already envisioning changes. This wall could use a nice floral wallpaper. Something cheerful for someone in my condition. She touched the wall where I'd planned to hang my easel. And we'll need to block that window. Too much light gives me headaches now. My hands clenched into fists. Get out. Sarah, Michael warned, she's sick. Get out. Now. They left, but I could hear them whispering in the hallway. I locked the studio door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. This room represented everything I'd worked for, everything my parents had wanted for me. I wouldn't let her take it. That afternoon, Emma called back. I checked with 3 major hospitals, she said. No Linda Morrison in any oncology departments. No records of any cancer screenings either. Are you sure? Positive. Sarah, if she's lying about this. She is. I know she is. But knowing and proving were different things. I needed more evidence. Over the next week, Linda's behavior became increasingly bold. She'd arrive each morning with more boxes, each one labeled with things like Linda's bedroom linens and Linda's medications. She'd grown comfortable acting as if her moving in was already decided. The first real confrontation came on Tuesday morning. I found Linda in my kitchen, reorganizing my cabinets. "What are you doing?" I asked, watching her move my grandmother's china to make room for her own dishes. "Just making some space, dear. When I move in, I'll need room for my things." She held up a chipped mug. "This one's seen better days, hasn't it? Maybe it's time to let it go." The mug had been my mother's favorite. She'd drunk her morning coffee from it every day for 15 years. "Put it back," I said quietly. "Sarah, be reasonable. There's no room for." "Put it back." Something in my tone must have warned her, because she carefully placed the mug back on the shelf. But I saw the flash of anger in her eyes before she quickly covered it with her wounded expression. "I'm only trying to help," she said, her voice trembling. "This is so hard for me, you know. Facing my mortality, having to depend on others. If you're really dying, shouldn't you be getting treatment? Spending time with doctors?" Linda's hand fluttered to her throat. "The treatments are aggressive. Dr. Thompson and I decided quality of life was more important than quantity at this stage." "How convenient." "What did you say?" "Nothing. But I was already planning my next move." That evening, Michael came home to find me cooking dinner in unusual silence. "Everything okay?" he asked, loosening his tie. "Your mother reorganized my kitchen today." He sighed. "Sarah, she's trying to help. She knows this situation is difficult for everyone." She threw away my mother's coffee mug. Michael paused in the doorway. "She what?" "Said it was chipped and time to let it go." I turned to face him. That mug was the last thing my mother drank from before the accident. For a moment, I saw something flicker across Michael's face. Doubt, maybe. But then his expression hardened again. "I'm sure it was an accident. Mom wouldn't do that on purpose. Wouldn't she?" The next day, I decided to do some investigating of my own. While Linda was supposedly at a doctor's appointment, I drove to her house. Her car was in the driveway. I knocked on the door, and she answered wearing gardening clothes, her hands dirty with soil. "Sarah, what are you doing here? I thought you had a doctor's appointment." She blinked rapidly. "Oh, that. It was cancelled. Last minute. You know how doctors are." She wiped her hands on a towel. "I decided to work in the garden instead. The fresh air is supposed to be good for my condition." "Which condition is that exactly?" The cancer, of course." "What type?" Another pause. "It's complicated. Dr. Thompson explained it, but the medical terms are so confusing." I nodded and left, but not before noticing the real estate flyers scattered on her kitchen table. All of them featured houses much larger and more expensive than her current ranch home. That evening, I called Dr. Thompson's old clinic again, this time speaking to a different receptionist. "I'm trying to reach Dr. Thompson about my mother-in-law's treatment," I said. "Ma'am, Dr. Thompson retired 3 years ago. The clinic closed down." "Are you sure you have the right doctor?" "Very sure. Thank you." I hung up and immediately called Emma. "I need you to check something else for me," I said. "Can you find out if there are any Dr. Thompsons practicing oncology in the area?" "Sarah, what's going on?" "I think Linda is lying about having cancer." There was a long pause. That's a serious accusation." "I know. But Emma, she's trying to take over my house. She's already picking out wallpaper for my art studio. Give me a day. I'll make some calls." The next morning brought a new surprise. I came downstairs to find Linda directing 2 delivery men as they carried a hospital bed into my living room. "What is this?" I demanded. "My bed," Linda said matter-of-factly. "The doctor says I'll need to elevate my legs soon. For the circulation problems." "You didn't ask me." Michael approved it. She patted the metal railings. "Don't worry, it's temporary. Just until we can set up my permanent room." I found Michael in the kitchen, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper as if nothing unusual was happening. You approved a hospital bed in our living room? It's temporary, Sarah. Just until we can convert your studio. My studio that you haven't asked permission to convert. He looked up at me, and I saw exhaustion in his eyes. What do you want me to do? Let my dying mother sleep on the floor? I want you to ask me before making decisions about my house. Our house. My house, I corrected. The deed is in my name. I bought it with my inheritance. Michael's face darkened. So that's what this is about. Money. Your precious inheritance. No, it's about respect. Something your mother has never shown me. She's dying, Sarah. Is she? The words came out before I could stop them. Michael stared at me. What did you say? I could have backed down then. Could have apologized and played along. Instead, I doubled down. I said, is she? Because I called Dr. Thompson's office. He retired 3 years ago. The newspaper crumpled in Michael's hands. You're checking up on my mother? Someone has to. She's sick, Sarah. Dying. And you're acting like she's some kind of criminal. Maybe she is. Michael stood up so quickly his chair fell backward. That's enough. I won't listen to you accuse my mother of faking cancer. Then don't listen. But I'm not converting my studio, and I'm not letting her move in until I have proof she's actually sick. Proof? What kind of proof? Medical records. Test results. Something more than her word and a lot of dramatic tears. Michael stared at me for a long moment. I can't believe you right now. My mother is facing death, and you're demanding paperwork. He stormed out, leaving me alone with the sound of the delivery men assembling Linda's hospital bed in my living room. Emma called that afternoon with news. I found 2 Dr. Thompsons in the area, she said. One is a pediatrician, the other is a dermatologist. Neither has ever treated Linda Morrison. What about retired oncologists named Thompson? I checked that too. There was a Dr. Robert Thompson who practiced oncology until 2019, but he moved to Florida when he retired. I called his old office. They have no records of treating Linda Morrison. I felt a mix of vindication and dread. So she's lying. It looks that way. Sarah, what are you going to do? I don't know yet. But I can't let her steal my house with fake tears and phony medical drama. That evening, Linda put on quite a performance. She moved slowly around the house, occasionally gripping furniture for support. She asked Michael to help her into the hospital bed, claiming she was too weak to manage alone. The pain is getting worse, she told him, loud enough for me to hear from the kitchen. Dr. Thompson warned me this would happen. Should we call him? Michael asked, genuine concern in his voice. No. He's done all he can. We just have to make the best of the time we have left. I watched this theater from the doorway, my anger building with each fake wince and practiced sigh. The next few days followed a similar pattern. Linda would arrive each morning, bringing more of her belongings and making increasingly bold changes to my house. She replaced my bathroom towels with her own, rearranged my bookshelf to accommodate her romance novels, and even had the audacity to move my wedding photo to make room for a picture of herself and Michael. The breaking point came on Friday evening. I came home from grocery shopping to find Linda in my bedroom, going through my jewelry box. What are you doing? She looked up, not the least bit embarrassed. I was looking for something nice to wear to church on Sunday. I want to look presentable when I tell everyone about your generous offer to let me live here. My generous offer? Well, of course. Michael's told everyone how wonderful you've been about this whole situation. I stepped closer, my voice dangerously low. Put my jewelry back and get out of my bedroom. Sarah, there's no need to be selfish. I'm only borrowing. Get out. Linda's mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw cold calculation in her eyes. Then the wounded expression returned. I don't understand why you're being so hostile. I'm a dying woman trying to maintain some dignity in my final months. You're a liar trying to steal my house. The words hung in the air between us. Linda's face went white, then red. How dare you? How dare I what? Tell the truth? You're not dying, Linda. You're not even sick. That's a terrible thing to say. It's a terrible thing you're doing. We stared at each other across my bedroom, the pretense finally dropped. Linda straightened up, abandoning her frail act for a moment. You can't prove anything, she said quietly. Can't I? Something in my tone must have worried her, because she quickly reverted to her dying act. I think I need to lie down, she said weakly. All this stress isn't good for my condition. She shuffled out of my bedroom, but not before I caught her slipping my mother's pearl earrings into her pocket. That night, I made a decision. I was going to expose Linda's lies, but I needed to do it right. I needed witnesses, and I needed it to be public enough that she couldn't wiggle out of it. I called Jessica, Michael's sister. Jessica, it's Sarah. I need to talk to you about your mother. Is she okay? Michael said she's been declining rapidly. That's what I need to talk to you about. Can you come over this weekend? Maybe bring the whole family? Of course. Is there anything I can do? Just come. And Jessica? Don't tell your mother I called. Next, I called Patricia, Linda's sister. Patricia, I'd like to have a family dinner this weekend. For Linda. I think it would mean a lot to her to have everyone together. Oh, Sarah, that's so thoughtful. Linda's been so worried about being a burden. She's not a burden, I lied smoothly. Family takes care of family. By Saturday morning, I had arranged for the entire extended family to come for dinner. Michael was thrilled when I told him. Sarah, this is wonderful. Mom will be so happy. I hope so. Linda was indeed ecstatic about the dinner party. She threw herself into preparations with an energy that seemed inconsistent with someone supposedly in the final stages of cancer. I want everything to be perfect, she told me, arranging flowers in my crystal vase. It's so important for family to come together during difficult times. Yes, I agreed. It is. She spent the day cooking, cleaning, and decorating, only occasionally remembering to act weak and tired. I watched her performance with growing disgust and determination. That evening, I made my final preparations. I had copies of all the hospital records Emma had helped me gather, the phone logs from my calls to various medical offices, and even a recording of my conversation with Dr. Thompson's former receptionist. Emma arrived early to help with last-minute preparations. Are you sure about this? She asked as we set the dining room table. I'm sure. I can't let her destroy my marriage and steal my home with lies. But what if Michael doesn't believe you? Then I'll know where I stand. The family began arriving at 6. Jessica and David with their twin boys, who immediately ran to hug their grandmother. Patricia and her husband Tom, looking appropriately somber. Michael's aunts and uncles, his cousins, all gathering around Linda with expressions of love and concern. Linda greeted each arrival with carefully orchestrated frailty, accepting hugs and condolences with practiced grace. You look so thin, Patricia said, studying her sister with worried eyes. I don't have much appetite these days, Linda replied with a weak smile. But I'm trying to stay strong for Michael. The doctors aren't giving you anything for that? Asked Michael's Aunt Ruth. Oh, there are medications, but they make me so foggy. I'd rather be present for these precious moments with family. I watched this performance from the kitchen, my folder of evidence hidden in the pantry. Linda was very good at this. For a moment, I almost doubted myself. Then I remembered her measuring my studio, throwing away my mother's mug, going through my jewelry box. As we gathered around the dining table, Linda struggled to her feet with Michael's help. I want to thank you all for coming, she began, her voice wavering with emotion. As you know, I've received some difficult news about my health. The room fell silent. Every eye was on Linda as she dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. The doctors tell me I have 6 months, maybe less. It's been hard to accept, but I'm grateful for the time I have left. She looked around the table, her performance flawless. And I'm especially grateful to Sarah, who has graciously agreed to let me move in with her and Michael during my final months. Everyone turned to look at me with warm, approving smiles. I felt their expectation, their assumption of my generosity in the face of tragedy. This was it. The moment of truth. I stood up slowly, my hand steady despite my racing heart. I have something to say too. Linda smiled, clearly expecting me to play along with her script, to accept the family's praise for my supposed selflessness. Instead, I walked to the pantry and retrieved my folder. I spoke to Dr. Thompson's office, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent room. And every other oncologist in the state. The color began to drain from Linda's face. The dining room went completely silent except for the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Linda's fork dropped onto her plate, the clatter echoing in the tense air. Her face, already pale, turned almost white. I don't understand, she stammered, reaching for her water glass with visibly shaking hands. Dr. Thompson doesn't share patient details. That's interesting, I said calmly, opening my folder, because Dr. Thompson retired 3 years ago. His clinic doesn't even exist anymore. Michael shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. Sarah, what are you doing? I pulled out the first set of papers and placed them on the table. I checked with every cancer hospital within 100 miles. No Linda Morrison has been diagnosed with cancer. No Linda Morrison has even been tested for it. The room erupted in whispers and shocked murmurs. Linda's sister Patricia leaned forward, her face etched with confusion and growing concern. Linda, is this true? She's lying. Linda shouted, abandoning her frail act as she stood up suddenly. She's trying to turn you all against me because she doesn't want me in her fancy house. Actually, I said, sliding the hospital records across the table toward Patricia, I'm telling the truth. These are the official records. You can call and verify for yourselves. Michael grabbed the documents with trembling hands, his eyes scanning the pages frantically. This has to be wrong. Mom wouldn't, she couldn't. But she would, Jessica said quietly from her end of the table. Remember when she faked pneumonia right before your wedding? We had to postpone everything by 2 weeks. That was real. Linda protested. Or the mysterious heart condition when you got that job offer in Seattle? David added, his voice thoughtful. The one that miraculously cleared up the day after you turned down the position? Linda's face twisted with a mixture of anger and desperation. Jessica, David, how dare you? I'm your mother. Yes, you are, Jessica said, her voice heavy with sadness. And I love you. But this has to stop. The lies, the manipulation, the constant drama. It's not okay. Michael sank back into his chair, the paper scattered in front of him. Slowly, painfully, the truth was sinking in. The house, he whispered, his voice barely audible. This was all about the house. Linda's composure finally cracked completely. Of course I wanted the house, she screamed, all pretense abandoned. She doesn't deserve it. She used blood money from her dead parents to buy that beautiful home while I'm stuck in my pathetic little ranch house. It's not fair. The shocked gasps around the table told me that Linda had revealed more than she intended. Patricia's face had gone ashen. Blood money? Michael repeated, his voice dangerous. Not fair? I said, keeping my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. Like it wasn't fair when you tried to convince Michael to challenge my inheritance in court. Or when you told everyone at church that I was flaunting my parents' death by buying the house? More gasps around the table. Linda clearly hadn't shared these particular details with the rest of the family. Michael's head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock and dawning horror. You did what? She needed to be put in her place, Linda hissed, pointing an accusing finger at me. Always acting so perfect, so independent. A real wife would have given that money to her husband instead of buying herself a palace. Like you gave your inheritance to Dad? Patricia asked, her voice sharp with anger. Oh wait, you didn't get one because Grandma saw right through your act. Is that what this is really about, Linda? Jealousy? The truth hung heavy in the air like a toxic cloud. Linda's face crumpled, but not in her usual fake tears. This time it was genuine defeat. The careful manipulation she'd orchestrated over months was falling apart, exposing years of jealousy, resentment, and calculated cruelty. I just wanted. She started, then stopped, looking lost and small for the first time I could remember. You wanted to control everything, like always, Jessica finished, her voice filled with disappointment. But this time you went too far. Faking cancer? That's not just cruel to Sarah, Mom. It's cruel to everyone who's actually fighting that battle. It's cruel to us, your family, who believed you were dying. Michael stood up again, but this time his posture was completely different. Defeated, exhausted, broken. I think everyone should go home, he said quietly, his voice hollow. Mom, I'll drive you back to your house. But Michael, Linda started desperately. No, Mom. Not this time. Not anymore. As the family began to file out, each person avoiding Linda's increasingly desperate attempts to catch their eyes, I remained seated at the table. The untouched dinner grew cold as conversations continued in hushed, shocked tones in the hallway. Patricia stopped beside my chair, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. I'm so sorry, Sarah, she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. We should have seen this sooner. We should have protected you from her. Jessica lingered as well, her face full of regret. Sarah, I want you to know, we don't all think like her. What she did was unforgivable. Thank you, I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. And Sarah? Jessica continued, squeezing my hand. Don't let her win. That house, your studio, your dreams, fight for them. You've earned them. After the last family member left, I began the mechanical task of clearing the barely touched dinner plates. The sound of Michael's car starting and pulling away echoed through the quiet house, and I wasn't sure if he would come back tonight. I wasn't sure of anything anymore. But as I stood in my kitchen in my house, I felt something unexpected washing over me. Relief. Pure, overwhelming relief. The truth was finally out. The lies had been exposed. And with that exposure, the crushing weight of years of subtle manipulation, forced smiles, and swallowed anger finally lifted from my shoulders. I walked to the window that overlooked my garden, watching the last traces of sunset paint the sky in deep purples and golds. The garden my parents had helped me plan before they died. The garden I'd tended with my own hands, in the shadow of the house I'd bought with their memory guiding me. Whatever happened next with Michael, whatever consequences this night would bring, I knew I'd done the right thing. My parents had raised me to stand up for myself, to fight for what was right, and tonight I had finally honored their memory in the way they would have wanted. The sound of the front door opening made me turn. Michael stood in the doorway, his face etched with exhaustion and something else, shame, regret, and perhaps the beginning of understanding. I dropped her off at home, Michael said, his voice rough and strained. She cried the whole way there. Real tears this time. Said I was choosing you over her, that I was abandoning her in her hour of need. I stayed silent, watching as he moved slowly into the kitchen, looking lost and uncertain in the space that had always been our home. He ran his hand along the counter we'd chosen together during our renovation, as if trying to ground himself in something real and true. But that's not what this is about, is it? He continued, his voice gaining strength. This isn't about choosing you over her. This is about choosing truth over lies, reality over manipulation. I've been so blind, Sarah. So incredibly, willfully blind. I leaned against the sink, my arms crossed, studying the man I'd married. Yes, you have been. All those convenient emergencies over the years. All those mysterious illnesses that appeared whenever we were about to do something important together. He shook his head slowly, as if trying to clear away years of fog. The tropical disease before our Italy trip. The heart palpitations when I got the job offer in Seattle. And now this elaborate cancer lie. His voice cracked. She knew exactly what she was doing, didn't she? She's been manipulating me my entire adult life. She's been manipulating all of us, I said softly. But you, Michael, you chose to believe her. Even when the evidence was right in front of you. Michael looked at me then, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. I saw the moment when the full weight of what had happened finally hit him. How did you stay? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Knowing she was manipulating everything, watching me believe her lies every single time, seeing me choose her version of reality over yours, how did you not leave me? Because I loved you, I replied simply, the truth of it still surprising me. Because I hoped that someday you'd see her for who she really is. But Michael, I can't do it anymore. I won't be the villain in her stories. I won't sacrifice my dreams, my home, my sanity to feed her need for control. He nodded slowly, sinking into one of our kitchen chairs as if the weight of realization was too much to bear standing. What she did tonight, faking cancer, lying to our entire family, his voice broke completely. My Aunt Carol died of breast cancer last year. We all watched her fight so hard, saw what that disease really does to someone. How could Mom use that? How could she mock that kind of suffering for her own selfish purposes? I moved to sit across from him, feeling the weight and importance of this moment between us. Your mother needs professional help, Michael. This level of manipulation, this willingness to lie about terminal illness, it's not normal behavior. It's not healthy. Jessica called me on the drive back, he said, rubbing his face with both hands. She's already looking into therapists who specialize in personality disorders. She thinks Mom's behavior has gotten progressively worse since Dad died 5 years ago, the need to control everything, to be the center of attention, to manufacture crises when life gets too normal. We sat in silence for several minutes, the ticking of the kitchen clock marking time as we both processed the evening's revelations and their implications for our future. Finally, Michael reached across the table, his hand open and vulnerable, palm up. I know I don't deserve it, he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. I know I've failed you as a husband in every way that matters. But if you're willing, I'd like a chance to make this right. To be the man you married, the husband you deserve, not just the son my mother wanted me to be. I stared at his outstretched hand, thinking of everything we'd been through together. The good times before Linda's manipulation had poisoned everything. The man I'd fallen in love with, who'd been buried under years of guilt and obligation. It won't be easy, I warned him. There have to be boundaries now. Real, non-negotiable boundaries. No more emergency visits that turn out to be manipulation. No more guilt trips. No more letting her make decisions about our life, our home, our future. I know, he agreed readily. And I think, he hesitated, then continued with growing determination, I think we need to go to counseling together. I need to understand how I let this happen, how I became so blind to what was right in front of me. How I hurt you by constantly putting her manipulative needs before your legitimate ones. I felt tears prick at my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of hope, of recognition. This was the man I'd married, the one who'd been buried under years of his mother's psychological manipulation. Okay, I said finally, placing my hand in his. We can try. But Michael, this is your one chance. I won't go through this again. You won't have to, he promised. I swear to you, Sarah. Things are going to be different. The weeks that followed were challenging in ways I hadn't expected. Linda's reaction to being exposed was swift and dramatic. She called Michael dozens of times a day, alternating between tearful apologies and bitter accusations. She showed up at our house unannounced, sometimes playing the victim and sometimes revealing flashes of genuine anger at having her schemes thwarted. You've turned my son against me, she accused during one particularly ugly confrontation on our front porch. I gave birth to him, raised him, sacrificed everything for him, and now he's choosing some gold-digging orphan over his own mother. Michael, to his credit, didn't take the bait. Mom, you lied about having cancer. You manipulated our entire family. This isn't about Sarah, this is about your choices. I never said I had cancer, she protested, though we all remembered her dramatic announcement at the family dinner. You specifically said the doctor gave you 6 months to live, I pointed out. I was speaking metaphorically. It would have been almost funny if it weren't so pathetic. Linda seemed genuinely unable to acknowledge the magnitude of what she'd done, the hurt she'd caused, or the trust she'd destroyed. The family's reaction was mixed. Jessica and Patricia were firmly on our side, having finally seen Linda's behavior for what it really was. But some of the extended family struggled with the situation. Michael's Aunt Ruth kept calling, trying to convince us that we were being too hard on a sick old woman. She's not sick, Michael would patiently explain. That's the whole point, Aunt Ruth. She lied about being sick to manipulate us. But she's still your mother, Ruth would argue. Family is family. It was Jessica who finally put an end to those conversations. She called a family meeting, without Linda, and laid out everything that had happened over the years. The pattern of lies, the convenient illnesses, the manipulation tactics. She'd even done research into Linda's behavior, consulting with a psychologist friend who confirmed that Linda's actions were consistent with certain personality disorders. Mom needs help, Jessica told the assembled family. Professional help. But that doesn't mean we have to enable her behavior or sacrifice our own well-being to manage her emotions. Slowly, the family began to understand. More importantly, they began to support the boundaries we'd established. Michael threw himself into therapy with an intensity that surprised me. He attended sessions twice a week, once with me for couples counseling, and once on his own to work through his childhood patterns and the complex relationship with his mother. I'm learning about something called enmeshment, he told me after one particularly difficult session. It's when parent-child boundaries get blurred, when the parent treats the child as an emotional partner instead of allowing them to develop independence. That sounds like Linda, I observed. It is Linda. And it explains so much about why I always felt responsible for her emotions, why I couldn't say no to her, why I felt guilty whenever I chose my own needs over hers. I was learning things too. In our couple sessions, Dr. Martinez helped me understand how I'd enabled some of the dysfunction by trying to keep peace at any cost. I'd swallowed my own needs and feelings for years, hoping that if I just tried hard enough, Linda would eventually accept me. You can't earn love from someone who's determined to withhold it, Dr. Martinez explained. And trying to do so often means sacrificing your own authenticity and self-worth. Meanwhile, I threw myself into reclaiming my house and my dreams. I spent hours in my art studio, finally setting it up the way I'd always envisioned. The north-facing windows provided perfect natural light for painting, and I hung my easel exactly where Linda had said it couldn't go. My first painting in the new studio was of my parents' garden, the one they'd planned but never got to see finished. As I worked on the canvas, layering colors and capturing memories, I felt their presence with me. They would have been proud to see me finally standing up for myself. The painting became a kind of therapy. Each brushstroke was an act of reclamation, every color choice a declaration of independence. When Michael came home from work, he'd often find me there, lost in the creative process that Linda had tried so hard to steal from me. It's beautiful, he said one evening, studying the half-finished canvas. They would have loved seeing you here, doing what makes you happy. Yes, I agreed. They would have. But not all of our progress was smooth. About a month after the dinner revelation, Linda escalated her tactics. She started calling Michael's workplace, claiming emergencies that required his immediate attention. When that didn't work, she began showing up at his office, creating scenes that embarrassed him professionally. She told my boss that I was abandoning her in her time of need, Michael reported after one particularly difficult day. She actually used the word dying to describe her condition. Even after everything that happened? She's doubled down. She's telling anyone who will listen that you forced me to choose between my wife and my dying mother, and that I chose wrong. This was when I learned that Linda's manipulation extended far beyond our family. She'd spent years cultivating an image in the community as the devoted mother and long-suffering widow. Her version of events, that I was a heartless daughter-in-law who'd turned her son against her during her cancer battle, found sympathetic ears among people who didn't know the full story. I started getting cold looks at the grocery store. Mrs. Peterson, who'd been friendly for years, actually crossed the street to avoid talking to me. The librarian, who'd always complimented my book choices, now barely acknowledged my presence. Let them believe what they want, Emma advised during one of our weekly coffee dates. The people who matter know the truth. But it hurt. I'd never realized how much Linda's poisonous narrative could affect my daily life, how her lies could turn my own community against me. The turning point came when Linda made a critical mistake. In her desperation to maintain her victim narrative, she decided to seek sympathy from an unexpected source, my old neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who'd been close to my parents. Mrs. Chen called me the day after Linda's visit, her voice shaking with anger. "That woman came to my house," she said. "She told me the most terrible things about you, Sarah. She said you'd inherited blood money and used it to buy a house while refusing to help your dying mother-in-law." My heart sank. Mrs. Chen had been like a grandmother to me after my parents died. "Mrs. Chen, I can explain." "Oh, honey, you don't need to explain anything to me. I knew your parents for 20 years. I know exactly what kind of person you are." Her voice turned steely. "And I know manipulation when I see it. That woman is a liar." "You could tell?" "Of course I could tell. She kept asking about your inheritance, how much the house cost, whether your parents had life insurance. She wasn't interested in talking about your grief or your loss, she was fishing for financial information." Mrs. Chen's endorsement meant more to me than I could express. But more importantly, it gave me an idea. "Mrs. Chen, would you be willing to talk to some of the other neighbors? Set the record straight?" "Honey, I already have. I called Mary Peterson right after that woman left my house. And I plan to call a few more people today." Within a week, the tide in the neighborhood had turned. Mrs. Chen, it turned out, was something of a community matriarch, and her opinion carried significant weight. When she vouched for my character and exposed Linda's fishing expedition for information about my finances, people began to see Linda's story in a different light. But Linda wasn't finished. If anything, having her community manipulation backfire made her more desperate and reckless. The next escalation came on a Tuesday morning when I was working in my studio. I heard the front door open, a sound that made my blood run cold, since Michael was at work and I'd changed the locks after the cancer revelation. "Hello, Sarah," Linda's voice called from the hallway. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, keeping the line open as I confronted her. "How did you get in here?" "I had a key made years ago," she said matter-of-factly, as if breaking into my home was perfectly reasonable. "For emergencies." "This isn't an emergency. You're trespassing." "This is my son's house too." "No, it's not. And you need to leave immediately." Linda looked around my studio with undisguised hatred. "Look at all the space going to waste. You could fit a lovely bedroom set in here. Maybe a nice sitting area by the window. Get out." "I'm not going anywhere. I'm moving in today, just like we originally planned." She'd actually brought suitcases, I realized. They were sitting by the front door, packed as if she truly intended to take up residence. "The police are on their way," I told her. "The police?" Linda laughed. "What are you going to tell them? That a dying woman's son's mother came to visit? I'm going to tell them that someone broke into my house with an illegally copied key and is refusing to leave." For the first time, Linda seemed to realize that her usual tactics weren't going to work. The calculation in her eyes became sharper, more desperate. "You think you've won," she said quietly. "You think you've turned everyone against me and stolen my son. But I know what you really are." "What am I, Linda?" You're a parasite. You latched onto my son after your parents died, used your orphan status to manipulate him into feeling sorry for you. Then you used their death money to buy this house and tried to cut me out of his life. The words should have hurt, but instead, I felt an odd sense of relief. Linda was finally showing her true colors, dropping all pretense of being the wounded victim. You know what I think? I said calmly. I think you're jealous. Jealous that Michael loves me, jealous that I have something beautiful that you can't control, jealous that your manipulation finally stopped working. Linda's face contorted with rage. You don't deserve any of this. You don't deserve him, you don't deserve this house, you don't deserve. The sound of sirens cut off her tirade. 2 police officers arrived and listened to both our stories. Linda tried her dying victim act, but the officers were more interested in the illegal key and the breaking and entering than in her sob story. Ma'am, even if this is your son's house, which the deed says it's not, you can't enter someone's home without permission, Officer Rodriguez explained patiently. But I'm family. That doesn't give you the right to break into someone's house. They escorted Linda off the property with a warning that future incidents would result in arrest. I watched from my window as she loaded her suitcases back into her car, her face a mask of fury and defeat. Michael was horrified when I told him what had happened. She had a key made? When? She said years ago. For emergencies. Sarah, I had no idea. I never gave her permission to do that. I know you didn't. That evening, we changed all the locks again and installed a security system. Michael also did something I hadn't expected. He called Linda and delivered an ultimatum. Mom, you broke into our house today. You frightened my wife and violated our privacy. You have 2 choices, get professional help or we're done. I could hear Linda's voice through the phone, shrill and desperate, but I couldn't make out the words. No, Mom. No more excuses, no more manipulation, no more drama. You get therapy, or you don't get access to me or my life. Those are your options. He hung up and turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before, complete resolve. I should have done that years ago. Yes, you should have. But you did it now. That's what matters. Linda's response was predictable. She called Jessica, crying about how cruel Michael was being. She called Patricia, claiming that I'd brainwashed her son. She even called Michael's boss again, this time saying that Michael was having a nervous breakdown and needed family intervention. But this time, no one was buying it. Jessica had already briefed the family on the new boundaries. Patricia had witnessed Linda's meltdown at the dinner and wasn't sympathetic to her manipulations. And Michael's boss, who'd dealt with Linda's workplace appearances before, was actually relieved to hear that Michael was taking control of the situation. The breakthrough came 2 weeks later when Jessica called with news. She's agreed to therapy, Jessica announced. Dr. Sarah Brennan, who specializes in personality disorders. Mom starts next week. What changed her mind? Patricia and I gave her an ultimatum too. She can get help and try to rebuild relationships with her family, or she can be cut off completely. No more holidays, no more family gatherings, no more contact with any of us. And she chose therapy? She chose the possibility of staying connected to family. It's a start. Dr. Brennan, it turned out, was exactly what Linda needed, a no-nonsense therapist who didn't buy into manipulation tactics and who specialized in helping people with narcissistic and borderline personality traits develop healthier relationship patterns. The process was slow and often frustrating. Linda would make progress, then backslide into old behaviors. She'd have insights in therapy, then try to use those insights to manipulate family members in new ways. But gradually, very gradually, things began to change. The first real sign came about 3 months into Linda's therapy. She called Michael to apologize, not for being misunderstood or for our reaction to her behavior, but for the actual harm she'd caused. I lied about having cancer, she said simply. It was wrong, and it hurt people I care about. I'm sorry. It wasn't a perfect apology. There was still a hint of self-justification in her tone, but it was a beginning. The second sign came a month later, when Linda sent me a card. Not a dramatic gesture or a manipulation tactic, just a simple card that said, "I'm sorry for the pain I caused you. You didn't deserve that." Inside, she'd written a longer note acknowledging specific behaviors: the jewelry box incident, throwing away my mother's mug, trying to take over my studio. It was clear that Dr. Brennan was making her account for her actions in concrete terms rather than allowing her to hide behind vague statements about being misunderstood. Michael and I continued our own therapy throughout this period. We were learning to rebuild trust, to communicate more directly, and to establish our own relationship separate from Linda's influence. "I think I understand now why I always felt so guilty around her," Michael said during one session. "She trained me from childhood to believe that her emotional state was my responsibility. If she was unhappy, it was my job to fix it." "And how does that feel now?" Dr. Martinez asked. "Liberating. And terrifying. I'm still learning how to disappoint her without feeling like I'm destroying the world." For my part, I was learning to trust Michael's commitment to our marriage and to stop walking on eggshells around the topic of his mother. I used to feel like I had to choose between being honest about Linda's behavior and preserving my marriage, I admitted. I'm learning that a marriage where I can't be honest isn't worth preserving anyway. 6 months after the dinner confrontation, Michael and I decided to take that long-delayed trip to Italy. It felt symbolic somehow, reclaiming something that Linda's manipulation had stolen from us years before. The night before we left, Linda called. Not with an emergency or a guilt trip, but with a simple request. "Would you send me a postcard?" she asked. "I'd like to see where you go." It was such a normal request, the kind a reasonable mother-in-law might make, that it took me by surprise. "Of course," Michael said. "We'll send several." And we did. From Rome, from Florence, from the small Tuscan village where we spent our last 3 days. Simple postcards with brief, friendly messages. Nothing dramatic or emotionally loaded, just normal family communication. When we returned, our house was exactly as we'd left it. No emergencies had materialized, no crises had demanded Michael's immediate attention. Linda had actually managed 2 weeks without creating drama. It was a small thing, but it felt huge. "How was your trip?" she asked when Michael called to let her know we were home safely. "It was wonderful. Thank you for asking." "I'm glad. You both deserved some time together." Again, such a normal interaction that its very normalcy felt revolutionary. That's not to say everything was suddenly perfect. Linda still had setbacks, still occasionally tried to fall back into old patterns. The difference was that now she had tools to recognize those patterns and family members who were no longer willing to enable them. During one particularly difficult episode about 8 months after starting therapy, Linda called Michael crying about being lonely and forgotten. "I just feel like no one cares about me anymore," she sobbed. "I'm all alone, and no one visits, and I don't know why I'm even trying to get better." The old Michael would have immediately cancelled his plans and rushed over to comfort her. The new Michael listened with compassion but maintained his boundaries. "I hear that you're feeling lonely, Mom. That sounds really hard. Have you talked to Dr. Brennan about these feelings?" "She just tells me to examine my thoughts and feelings. She doesn't really care." "I think she does care, but she's helping you learn to manage difficult emotions in healthy ways." "What coping strategies has she taught you?" It was a revelation to watch Michael respond to his mother's distress with empathy but without taking responsibility for fixing her emotional state. And slowly, Linda began to learn that she could survive difficult feelings without manufacturing crises to get attention. The real test came during the first holiday season after the cancer revelation. Linda had always used holidays as opportunities for maximum drama, strategic illnesses, family conflicts, emotional manipulation designed to ensure she remained the center of attention. This year, Jessica and Patricia planned a family Thanksgiving with clear ground rules: no drama, no guilt trips, no discussion of past conflicts. Just family gathering to share a meal. "Do you think she'll stick to the rules?" I asked Michael as we drove to Jessica's house. I don't know. But if she doesn't, we'll leave. And she knows that. Linda was already there when we arrived, helping in the kitchen and making conversation with her grandchildren. She looked genuinely happy to see us, without the performative frailty or wounded martyrdom I'd grown to expect. "Sarah, I love your hair that way," she said when she saw me, and it sounded sincere rather than calculated. "Thank you, Linda." It was still awkward, there was too much history for everything to be smooth, but it was also peacefully normal in a way I hadn't experienced in years. The moment that convinced me Linda was really changing came when one of Jessica's twins accidentally knocked over a glass of cranberry juice, staining the white tablecloth. In the past, Linda would have either swooped in to manage the crisis, positioning herself as the heroic grandmother, or used it as an opportunity to create drama about ruined holidays and careless children. Instead, she simply handed the child a napkin and said, "Accidents happen, sweetie. Help me clean this up." No drama. No performance. Just a normal grandmother helping with a normal childhood mishap. After dinner, as we were getting ready to leave, Linda pulled me aside. "Sarah, I need to say something to you." I braced myself, expecting some kind of emotional ambush. "I know I can't undo the things I did. I know I hurt you badly, and I know trust isn't something I can just ask for back." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "But I want you to know that I'm grateful you didn't give up on our family. You could have left Michael, could have cut us all off. You had every right to do that." "Linda. Please, let me finish. What I did was unforgivable. The cancer lie, trying to steal your house, all of it. But you stood up for yourself and for what was right, and because you did that, I had to face who I'd become. I'm still working on changing, and I know I'll probably always be working on it. But I'm grateful you cared enough about Michael and this family to fight for it." It was the most honest thing Linda had ever said to me. And for the first time in 8 years, I felt like I was talking to a real person rather than a performer playing a role. "Thank you for saying that," I told her. "And thank you for doing the work to change. I'm trying. Some days are better than others. That's all any of us can do." As Michael and I drove home that evening, I reflected on how far we'd all come. It had been almost a year since the dinner confrontation, and while our family would never be the same, it was becoming something healthier and more honest. "How are you feeling about everything?" Michael asked as we pulled into our driveway. "Good," I said, surprised by how much I meant it. "Really good." "Even about Mom?" "Especially about your mom. I think she's really trying to change." "And us?" I looked at my husband, really looked at him. The man who'd learned to set boundaries with his mother, who'd committed to therapy and growth, who'd chosen to fight for our marriage rather than take the easy path of avoiding conflict. "We're better than we've ever been." That night, as I worked in my studio on a new painting, a landscape of the Italian countryside we'd visited, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. The pain, the confrontation, the slow work of rebuilding trust and establishing healthy relationships. My studio was exactly as I dreamed it would be. Bright, peaceful, filled with my work and my vision. Linda's hospital bed was long gone, donated to a charity that actually helped people with real medical needs. The house felt like mine again, like ours again. Most importantly, I felt like myself again. Not the woman walking on eggshells, not the daughter-in-law desperately trying to win approval that would never come, not the wife caught between her husband and his manipulative mother. Just Sarah Parker, artist, homeowner, wife to a man who'd learned to choose truth over manipulation and love over guilt. I picked up my brush and added another stroke of golden sunlight to the canvas, thinking of my parents and how proud they would be to see me finally, fully standing in my own power. The house stood quiet around me, but it was a peaceful quiet now. Not the tense silence of unspoken conflicts, but the calm of a home where truth was welcome and manipulation had finally lost its power. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, I knew. Linda would continue her therapy, but change was a gradual process. Michael and I would keep working on our marriage, building new patterns to replace the old dysfunctional ones. There would be setbacks and difficult days. But tonight, in my studio, in my house, in my life that I'd fought to reclaim, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete peace. The truth had set us all free. And that, I realized, had been worth fighting for all along.